We now know a lot more about this DLC that is going to be releasing in a few days. If you don't want any spoilers, I would click off this video right now. We got a bunch of new trailers and exclusive gameplay reveals from GameSpot, and I'll just link all those videos down in the description below. But if you do want a quick recap, we know about all the characters' stats, relics, and skills. The new Shifting Earth event is actually an entire brand new map, new Caligo and Gladius raids, new points of interest, some of which are offering unique rewards like re-rolling character skills, and there are a whole bunch of new bosses and enemies revealed. And no, it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting any Shadow of the Erdtree weapons. But I'm not going to have this video just me going over every single detail about the new stuff, because you guys can just check out those videos yourselves. But something that I can offer is opinions and breakdowns on the new characters, because GameSpot tried their best, but they didn't really do anything when it comes to breaking down the numbers and certain interactions that these characters have. We're going to first start off with the Undertaker. Definitely going to be a very, very powerful character. Her stats offer decent bulk in a B and HP, which is the exact same as the Executor. And she does also have an A scaling in both Strength and Faith, which that pretty much puts her in line with the Revenant with the Strength relic, although instead of being likely to find seals and having lots of FP, the Undertaker will be likely to find hammers and have a little bit of FP, actually in line with the Wilder. So even though she can get some decent incantation damage, if you did want to go into that playstyle, I would recommend having at least one FP boosting relic. But when it does come to her hammer playstyle, the new moveset seems to be pretty decent. The most important part of her hammer is going to be that charged heavy attack, because it outputs just as much stance damage as a colossal sword, but in a much faster animation. And when it comes to the Undertaker moveset, this charged heavy attack does seem to be very similar. The light attacks, however, do seem to be a little bit slower than the regular hammer moveset, but it does look like it lunges in a bit further to compensate, and the light attack combo also only lasts 4 hits instead of 5, which is actually very important due to her character relics and her character skill. But getting into her character skill, this one is pretty complicated, and we don't actually have footage of everything that this can do yet, but the skill itself is called Trance. It is a timed buff that lasts roughly 10 seconds, and it does grant the Undertaker a dashing dodge, kind of more similar to like a Bloodborne dodge, more so than the Duchess dodge, because it does go a little bit further, and you also can't chain it. She also has her regular sprint be just as fast as a surge sprint, which is great for stamina consumption. She also receives tier 2 hardness, which basically what this means is that you have a lot of poise. And as you can see in the gameplay, Loretta's slashing attack does not even stagger her. And when it comes to some like smaller and lighter types of attacks, they should be able to bounce off the character, very similar to how the Dragon Bolt Blessing spell works. But on top of all of that, she also receives a small damage boost, which I calculated to be around about 5% based on the gameplay that we see. I'm also not sure if this is going to be a weapon buff or it also applies to spells, but this number can be increased by attacking with the last light attack combo in the chain, which as I mentioned earlier is going to be your 4th light attack. You gain a further 7 or 8% damage increase. Now, I'm sure that you can go even higher, but the gameplay didn't show it, and honestly, in most cases, being that you only have 10 seconds, it's going to be pretty rare that you do get like a ×3 buff. But yes, this buff does expire when the character skill expires too, and there's no way to increase it to my knowledge. So really, by the time that you actually get like a ×2 or a ×3 buff, there's only going to be a few seconds left on the buff. Now, there actually is another part to this character skill when it is used with the ultimate attack. Now, there isn't any gameplay shown of this, but I'm just going to go off what was explained, and that's when you use the ultimate attack while the character skill is active, it also grants an additional damage boost, as well as the ability to cheat death, much like the Wilder can. Now, in terms of it making you unkillable throughout the entire duration, like the Revenant ultimate, or just based on the next hit like the Wilder passive, is undetermined. But speaking of the ultimate attack, named Loathsome Hex, it pulls out a big bone from her body, and it just whacks the boss with it. It goes very far, it gets A-frames, it does seem to have directional control, and it does a lot of damage. Its damage is second best out of all the Nightfarers when it comes to a singular attack, only losing out to the Wilder, and the Wilder has a very, very big chance of missing a boss. I'm sure every single Wilder main here has missed many ultimate attacks, whereas this one is going to be a lot harder to miss. But what makes this ultimate even better is not only its synergy with a character skill, but also her passive. For whatever reason, they decided to have her passive ability give her a free ultimate attack when your teammate pops an ult or when you dodge a grab attack. Now, you do only have a small window to do this, but the game does indicate that by having the icon light up purple, and you'll see like a purple glow on your character. And the best part is about this is that it doesn't even affect your main ultimate regen rate. So if you had 90% left on your ult and this passive worked and you used your ultimate, you'll still have that 90% left. So if you ever find yourself in a game with an Undertaker, just make sure to keep spamming your ult, because any single time that you get it, she can get it too. And the damage of this passive ultimate and the regular ultimate seems to be the exact same too. So like there's basically no downside. But no, it does not work with like another Undertaker passive. So you can't just like infinitely combo back and forth and like never run out of ultimates. Doesn't work that way. Now this ultimate might not seem to be as good in solo mode, but that's why they also added the grab attack counter too. It's not stated that it only works for grab attacks, and the people at GameSpot didn't even mention this at all, but I did determine that it was off a grab attack because one, the description states an enemy attack alongside an ally ult, and in the very first trailer, we see the Undertaker light up purple after dodging a grab attack, and then doing an ultimate directly afterwards. Now, part of the reason why GameSpot, even though they played for 6 hours and didn't mention this, might be because that this can only work while your character skill is active. So maybe when you dodge it while your skill is active, that's when you can get the free ultimate and not after every single grab attack, but we don't really know for sure. But yeah, this character already sounds crazy just based on her kit and her stats, but we haven't even gotten to the character relics yet. One of her relics actually boosts her damage when activating the ultimate, which also implies that it's going to boost the damage of the ult and after the ult. In terms of the amount of damage and the length of the buff and whether it works with the passive effect is not known yet. There is another relic that heals her allies when they are hit with the ultimates too, which can be very cool, especially if you're getting lots of ultimate attacks. Just have your teammates stand right next to the boss and they just get free heals. Hopefully, being that it is tied to an ultimate attack, it like completely heals them, but that might not be the case. The third relic improves the attack power of the last light attack, which should work exactly like the Twin Blade Talisman and would synergize perfectly with her character skill that I talked about. And lastly, there is a relic that gives her a damage boost while an incantation buff is active. Like the wording for this one is a bit weird, but that's how I am interpreting it. Now, we don't know how much the buff is going to give, nor if it does stack with many other types of buffs, but this definitely has a lot of potential, because if it does stack, then you could have a weapon buff with a body buff and an aura buff and a healing spell all in one. And if every single one of those buffs gives like a 10 to 20% damage boost, then this might be a little bit crazy, especially if the duration of the damage buff matches up with the duration of the spell buff. But overall thoughts is that I'm super excited to play her. She does seem very fun and versatile, whether you're going to a spell build, a physical damaging build, tanking and trading type of build, even like an ultimate attack spamming build would be cool. Like, there is lots to like about this Nightfarer. Now, as for the Scholar, this character, after looking at his new gameplay, he does seem to be pretty mid. However, there are a couple of things that haven't been shown that could definitely make this character a lot better. But to start off with his stats, yeah, these are abysmal. Okay health, FP, and stamina, but to have your only good damaging stat be Arcane is awful. Not because there's no like occult infusion in this game, so none of the infusible weapons will ever scale best off Arcane, but even the non-infusible weapons don't have many Arcane options at all. Like, the only thing Arcane is really going to be doing for you is proccing status effects like 25% faster compared to other characters. But your base damage itself is not going to be good. But the thing that will save his weapon damage would be if his starting weapon scales best off Arcane. We don't know exactly what the scalings are of this starting weapon. If that was to be the case, then his damage will be perfectly fine, and you could pair him alongside things like a Blood Infusion relic with a Chilling Mist relic, because with that higher Arcane, the status effects are obviously going to proc faster too. But if that's not the case, then you just gotta hope that you find the Ansper Rapier and Frozen Needle every single game, and then just spam status effects when possible. Okay, I just want to interrupt this really quick. It's me from the future. I was just editing this video, and then I realized that it actually does showcase the damage number of the Scholar's Thrusting Sword, and this is at level 7 with a Bleed Infusion, and is getting 48 damage. There is no way that this weapon has an arcane scaling. However, there is still hope for him to be a good damaging character outside of the weapons, and that is due to his passive ability, Bagcraft. This honestly might be the most powerful part of the entire character. This passive allows him to hold twice as many items per slot, as well as have the ability to level up said items. The way to level up these items is by using them. Different categories of items will have different thresholds for how many times they need to be used first, but the good thing is that the progression is shared amongst all items in that category. So for example, getting a fire pot to level 3 will actually make every single pot be level 3 for the remainder of the run. At level 2, the items do get a stat boost, and at level 3, they get a unique effect. Now from what we see in the gameplay, the damage difference from a level 1 fire pot to a level 2 fire pot is about 70%, which is honestly just insane. And although we didn't see what it was like at level 3, we can guess that it will explode twice, like from what we see in the trailers, and then combine the 70% damage with it hitting twice with all the pot boosting relics. Pots can easily be out-damaging any spell in the entire game. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video about this, it's going to be hard to come across many different types of pots outside of the fire pots, because you can infinitely buy them, and having to constantly buy them over and over again can get pretty tedious. And also, if you're fighting bosses resist to fire damage, it might not be the best thing, but the power is definitely going to be there. He can output a lot of damage. Now, there is one huge question that is yet to be answered, and that is, can the tools be upgraded? Because if we have the ability to get a level 3 Wraith Calling Bell and have it do crazy damage, this character is all of a sudden looking very powerful, and that B scaling that he gets in FP also looks very good. So yes, even though his scalings might suck, he doesn't need to have good scalings to use things like consumables or tools, because those don't scale of anything. That's probably why the Scholar's stats are designed to be this way, just to really hone in on him being a consumable-based character. Now, as for his character skill Analyze, there is also another unanswered question that I have that could definitely make or break this skill. But to first describe how it works, Scholar goes into a stance, he highlights enemies and allies, and the longer that you observe the enemies, the more that you benefit in terms of the buffs and debuffs. You have two options. The debuff has enemies deal less damage and take more damage in the next hit, and the buff gives you and your allies a stamina boost, as well as a protective bubble. Now, these bonuses are split up into tiers. If you only look at the enemies enough to fill up the first quarter of the circle, then you only gain a small boost. But when it's completely filled, then you get a greater boost. The debuff seems to be best because at tier 1, it can debuff enemies to have them deal around 15% less damage. And the reason why I say 15%, even though I don't know for sure, is because all the other debuffs that have enemies deal less damage is also 15%. But when you do get to a higher tier, it is going to be a ×2 debuff, which is probably going to be at least 20%, maybe even 30%. Now, we don't know the exact length of the buff, but it is going to be at least 15 seconds. Hopefully, it's going to be around about 30 seconds, but I did count 15 seconds in the gameplay that they showed, but it cut off, so it's probably going to be more than that. But also, when you do get to tier 3 with this debuff, it does make enemies take 60% more damage on the next hit, which is pretty much the equivalent of the Determination Ash of War, but it's just applied to all the enemies and not just your one weapon. Now, this can be great if you communicate with your team to coordinate an ultimate attack, but it definitely would suck if you're not communicating and you have somebody like an Iron Eye just hit the enemy with a singular arrow, and that debuff is pretty much just wasted. Now, but when it does come to the buff, it seems to add 30% more stamina at tier 3, and also at tier 3, or when the circle is fully completed, you do gain this protective bubble. Now, in terms of how much damage it negates, is completely unknown, because the gameplay only shows it be active for 1 second, and then it goes away. I'm guessing they designed it to only last 1 second as a way to just directly counter enemies that are about to hit you, which is it going to be worth it to lock onto an enemy for that long to max it out just to gain a bubble for 1 second? It might be, because in one of the trailers, it actually shows this bubble also dealing damage and staggering enemies. So if this bubble does do some decent damage and potentially stagger Night Lord bosses, it can be very useful. Although going to be pretty hard to pull off, assuming you have to analyze the boss every single time that you want to use it, which that actually is going to lead to my ultimate question that makes or breaks this character skill. When you lock off from an enemy, the circle effect actually starts to decay. However, there is a relic that does stop this decaying effect. So my question is, what happens after you use the character skill after fully analyzing an enemy? Does it reset back to 0? Or does it start to slowly decay over time? Does it not decay at all? because if it does start to decay, then this relic perk is probably going to be his most important one. If it resets back to 0 no matter what, that's going to be kind of shit for a boss fight, because you have to wait so long every single time you have to analyze. And if you're just spending a lot of time just standing there looking at an enemy, you're going to be a pretty bad teammate. Because one thing that I didn't mention is that the further away you are from an enemy, the slower it takes to build up the meter. And even if you are just like a little bit further away, it can take a very long time. But if they made it to where you only have to analyze once per fight, I don't know why, but for some reason, nobody at GameSpot had gameplay showing this or even described analyzing a boss a second time. So I'm not sure whether that's good news or bad news. But when it does come to his ultimate art communion, it tethers all enemies and binds them together, which makes them take shared damage. So when you damage one of the enemies, it damages all the rest that have this mark. Now, the damage that the tethered enemies take is only 20% of the main damage, which is definitely decent when it comes to like the multi-boss fights, but the amount of times that you're actually coming up against those like multiple bosses isn't going to be too high, and I did wish that this number was like closer to 50%, but then again, we don't know how long this ultimate is going to last. But this ultimate is also applied to yourself and allies, and this works very much like a life-stealing effect and a shared healing effect. So any single time that someone damages a marked enemy, it's going to heal the team, as it would when someone would be using a healing flask. There are also going to be some pretty decent relic abilities that the Scholar has. One I have already talked about in the prevent slowing of the character skill process, which depending on how the analyze skill actually works when proccing it the second and third time, might be dependent on how useful this relic actually ends up being. He also has a relic that earns runes based on the amount of people and enemies that he's analyzed. Honestly, not too hopeful for this perk at all, but then there is another one that has his ultimate deal damage over time, which hopefully the damage is actually pretty good. But in terms of my overall thoughts, his poor damaging stats does make him very limited in terms of options, but it is going to be very cool to try and get some big damage numbers out of some cool consumables. Who knows, maybe even the Wraith Calling Bell too. He can also play a pretty big support role, but I am worried about how useful the character skill is going to end up being when it might be very tedious and risky to use. Like some leveled up items and using things like the items confer effects to allies might end up working better for support. And in terms of his ultimate attack, I am a little bit less excited for this, as I did wish it served as like a way to like have enemies take more damage, because I fear that it's not going to be as useful for a 1v1 Night Lord boss. But that's basically everything that I wanted to cover in this one. If you have your own opinions, let me know down in the comments below. And if you are interested in me breaking down the characters when they do get released, definitely be subscribed. And definitely follow me on Twitch, because I am going to be live streaming there every single day, testing out the DLC extensively. Anyway, catch you guys in the next. See yas.